You think July is just summer. Warm skies, green fields, stable nature. But that's the illusion, because underneath it, July is not growth season. It's a stress test, and most plant systems don't pass it. Plants don't die suddenly. They collapse slowly, but you never see the warning, because everything still looks green on the surface. Therefore, people assume everything is fine, and that assumption is exactly what breaks ecosystems. Let's start with heat. July is the hottest point of the year across most of the United States. But temperature alone is not the real problem. Therefore, plants don't fail from heat. They fail from water loss speed. This is where vapor pressure deficit hits. It sounds technical, but it simply means the atmosphere starts pulling water out of plants faster than roots can replace it. Therefore, leaves start shutting down, not because they're dying, but because they're protecting themselves. And that protection slows everything. Now look at the soil. By July, soil moisture hits its annual low in many U.S. regions. But rainfall doesn't always disappear. Therefore, evaporation wins the balance. And roots start working in a dry battlefield. And then something worse happens. Wildfire season begins to peak. But fire doesn't just burn trees. Therefore, it resets entire ecosystems. Soil structure collapses. Carbon cycles break. And recovery takes years. But here's what most people miss. These events don't happen separately. They stack. Heat increases drought. Drought increases fire risk. Fire removes moisture retention. Therefore, the system accelerates itself into collapse. And crops are not safe either. July is when corn and soybeans hit critical growth stages. But heat stress during this window destroys reproduction. Therefore, yield loss happens silently, before harvest ever begins. Now zoom out. This is not random disaster behavior. It is a predictable midsummer stress cycle. But prediction means nothing without action. Therefore, the entire system depends on 9 interventions. And I'm not talking theory. These are real ecosystem protection mechanisms used across U.S. agriculture, forestry, and climate systems. Let's go step by step. Final truth, last dab line. July doesn't destroy life instantly. It exposes how fragile the system already is. But once stress passes a threshold, recovery stops being guaranteed. Therefore, survival depends on preparation before the collapse begins. Step 9. Early warning climate monitoring. Plants don't get warnings, but humans do. Therefore, NOAA drought maps and satellite vegetation data become the first defense layer. If you see stress early, you act early. Step 8. Evapotranspiration-based irrigation. Watering randomly fails in July, but plant demand is not random. Therefore, irrigation must match evapotranspiration demand. Otherwise, you either waste water or still lose plants. Step 7. Soil moisture conservation, mulching. Soil dries from the top down, but mulch blocks direct evaporation. Therefore, root zones stay stable longer during heat spikes. Step 6. Shade stress reduction systems. Direct sunlight increases leaf temperature beyond air temperature, but shade reduces the heat load instantly. Therefore, plants survive peak heat hours without shutdown. Step 5. Soil carbon restoration. Healthy soil holds water longer, but degraded soil loses moisture instantly. Therefore, organic matter becomes a hidden survival buffer. Step 4. Drought-resistant vegetation systems. Not all plants fail equally, but shallow root systems collapse first. Therefore, deep root adaptation becomes survival advantage in July cycles. Step 3. Fire buffer vegetation control. Fire doesn't need full forest to spread, but fuel continuity decides speed. Therefore, buffer zones slow ecosystem destruction long enough for recovery response. Step 2. Flood-resilient drainage systems. July doesn't only bring drought, but sudden storms still hit dry soil. Therefore, poor drainage turns rainfall into destructive runoff. Step 1. Stress-responsive ecosystem planning. Nothing works if timing is wrong. But ecosystems respond to cumulative stress, not single events. Therefore, planning must happen before July stress peaks. Not during, not after, before.